So, hi guys, welcome to Therapy Tuesday with me, Lesli-Ann Belnavis Elliott, Director of Art Therapy Jamaica. This is the first of a weekly series that I'll be doing with different mental health, well, not just mental health professionals, but professionals in mental health, education, expressive arts, medicine, and more. Today we're just gonna be focusing on art therapy, and by the end of the live, or closer to the end of the live, I'll talk about who is gonna come on next week, who we're gonna feature. So today, oh, before I get into today, let me just give an introduction of who I am. I am a registered art therapist. I have been, I trained at Florida State University. I have my master's degree in art therapy, and I also have a bachelor's in studio art. So I have a background in art and followed that passion and found art therapy and decided that art therapy is something that I really feel is needed in Jamaica. It's needed as an outlet. We see a lot of things happening even before COVID hit. Just ways in which persons were just coping or handling their anger or communication. I really felt that the arts is integral to us, and why not use something that is innate to us to help support us. So I studied it. I have been practicing as an art therapist for the past 12 years, 11 years in Jamaica, 1 year in the States after I finished my degree. So having been back home, I have worked in a lot of different projects and environments. My expertise, welcome guys. My expertise is that I have worked with children and adults with disabilities, physical and developmental and emotional disabilities, ranging from autism, cerebral palsy, ADHD, Down syndrome. Hi, the Ann Project. So yeah, a couple other populations that I've worked with the elderly in a nursing home. I have done works with persons with disabilities in educational settings and a children's home. I have done a 2-year project with teen girls in a correctional facility. And then I've been asked to do multiple projects over the years in different community projects. I've partnered with Smile Foundation, which is based in Canada, and the National Education Trust, where we did work with single mothers. And this was both in Kingston and in Montego Bay. So am I missing any other population? I've worked with quite a few persons, and I've even worked in private practice with adults, children, ranging from various psychological disorders, history of trauma, medical conditions, stress, children with behavioral problems, you name it. So that's a bit of what I have done, and I have decided within the past 2 to 3 years to really focus on establishing Art Therapy Jamaica and really trying to use this platform as an outlet for our people as best as possible. So yeah, having said all of that, gonna get into, and I must say that with what's happening with COVID, that has also brought on a challenge in terms of offering services. It's hey Stuart. Hi Coolie Mint. So it has really brought on a challenge in terms of how I interface as a therapist with clients. So now, turning my handmade fashion, I really pushing art therapy online as a service, but it's really a service that's done in person. Having said all of that, you're probably wondering, like, what is art therapy? Art therapy is a mental health profession that uses both. Hey, Andrew and Joni. So art therapy is a mental health profession that uses both art and psychology to help persons deal with their emotions, or especially in cases where it might be really difficult for somebody to actually articulate or talk about what is happening or formulate it into words so that they can address it. Art therapy is a way to help persons frame that. Hey, cream of pumpkin. It's a way to help persons frame how they are feeling, address those feelings, and identify and reflect or reframe what's happening in a creative way. So you might be like, okay, so there's psychology, there's psychiatry, you have different forms of approaches. Why is art therapy even important? Well, first off, the main thing about art therapy is that it uses art, and art is a form of communication. The art materials that are used are very therapeutic, from the quality, whether it's clay to paint, to sculpture, to photography. Each material that's used have different qualities that can evoke certain emotions. So, like, for example, if I perhaps want somebody to engage in maybe relaxation techniques, I might use paint because it's more fluid and it would evoke it can evoke that kind of response. Or if I want somebody to step back and reflect on something, I may give them an activity that they have to create and then look at, or has multiple steps that they have to figure out. Is there anything else about art therapy? The main thing about it is the relationship between the therapist, the client, and the art. One thing I will say about art therapy is that it can be used with anybody. As I've mentioned before, what my experience has been. Persons might think, oh, it's just for children. No, it's for anybody. And I have seen where persons will be like, or adults will be like, listen, this is not for me. And then by the end of it, they're like, you can't give us more time. So that's speaking to how it can impact persons. So having given that, thank you. It's really important. The triad between the client, the therapist, and the art materials is really critical. What I forgot to say is that it is done by art therapy. Person may feel like, oh, if I do an art activity, that's therapeutic. Art activities can be therapeutic. It will have that reaction. However, in terms of art therapy, because it involves art and psychology, because you have to be trained in psychology, then you really need to engage in it with a trained therapist. Okay. Yes, I am an artist. I have a background in studio art, so I'm also a photographer. But my main profession is that I'm an art therapist. So having broken down all of that about art therapy, we're focusing today on the art of coping. Sorry. And what does that word gets thrown around right now with everything that's happening? What does coping mean? It's really how you are able to or according to Wikipedia, let's do this, is how you're able to manage and or solve personal or interpersonal problems in order to try to master or minimize or tolerate stress. So in other words, we're looking at how can you manage what's happening right now. And so what is happening right now, especially with COVID, how are persons feeling? What is happening? Is it that I like to say this, that persons are maybe experiencing different stressors, and the stressors may come in different ways. So it may be, we know that quite a few persons now are losing their jobs or on the verge of losing their jobs, or their pay is cut in half. Children are now having to transition to doing school online, which that's major for some because everybody learns differently, so some may not respond well to that. And then you have parents who have to juggle work at home as well as manning their children or even their partners or whatever. So you have all of these things happening, and then there are lots of emotions that are floating around. So persons may be feeling fear, they're unsure of what's happening. There's a cloud of uncertainty that they may be experiencing. Did I say anger, possible depression, anxiety? You have all of these emotions, and in different persons, how these emotions manifest is different. So having all of these emotions existing, how does one cope? How does one manage those emotions, and how does art therapy help to support that? It honestly isn't a cookie cutter answer. Hey guys, thanks for joining. It honestly isn't a cookie cutter answer because it varies depending on the client based on their age, gender, and presenting situation. This is what I forgot to say in the beginning, is that the role of the therapist is also to establish a treatment plan and treatment goals with the client. So in this case, if a client came in and said, or they have expressed, anxiety around the changes right now, or some persons may be angry because they're not sure how, they don't have a sense of control, I would establish treatment plans and treatment goals and art activities in conjunction with all of those, and have that executed with the client. So I may ask, I would say, art, in cases where it may be somebody who is feeling anxious, one of the goals would be to look at relaxation techniques. First off, always identify what's going on. Always look at what's the emotions that a person is experiencing or are experiencing, and we create that. So I may ask a client to create how they're feeling, because you want to identify the feelings first, or the situation first, and how the person is responding to that. And once that's created, then we explore that together. So it's really looking at how are you feeling right now, how are you responding to those feelings, and then do you need support with how you're feeling. I know one of the major things is persons not having a sense of control right now. So then the art would help you to understand, hey, what is happening right now in terms of the emotions and how I'm feeling. and then identifying what can I control, what I can't control, and what steps do I need to take in terms of support. I must say that art therapy can be done independently as well, and in conjunction with another professional. So, guys, I guess I got into most of what I wanted to say. Is there any questions that person may have, about art therapy and about how art can be used to help persons to cope? Hey guys, thanks for joining. Hey Janelle. So I just talked about how art therapy can be used, or what the structure is in terms of how we can cope. So I basically was asking, what do you mean when you say all you can think of is feelings and art? Where does it start? Meaning, where does the art therapy process start? Okay. All right, so I'll answer this. Currently I'm having online sessions, and an online session would entail, or for now I'm hosting free 15-minute consultations with persons, and then we will have a session. Basically would entail me getting the information, what's happening with you, and then we'll set up an appointment. I'll get your email address, and then you will get a link from the actual the telehealth forum that I'm using, which is at this point is doxy.me, and then we would engage, just ensure that you have proper internet, or proper good browser system. A laptop might be needed, or you can use a tablet, but make sure that you have space to engage and create, and any materials that you have. Sometimes clients can use I will give them a link to draw online on not on that platform, but you can do that as well as whatever materials that you have in your space at this point in time, which is typically different than how a regular interface session would occur. Okay. The most enjoyment in my profession, what gives me the most enjoyment in my profession? Seeing transitions, seeing how persons would respond. I'll talk about when a client, I did a session with single mothers, and that entailed many stressors for them. Some were limited in terms of education, some had limitations in terms of finances, and then they had stressors, thinking just like COVID. They had their stressors, and so I didn't know how they would have responded to the process. They were, I wasn't sure what level of resistance I would have gotten in the beginning, and we had a 4-day 2-hour art therapy group session with about 14 women, and they I have to keep up with the questions. So they basically, we looked at identifying how they felt as mothers, what their stressors were, and where they needed areas of help, and then we looked at self, how to cope what, their emotions, and being honest with that, and how they display their emotions with their family members, and then what they can do in the future. And there was just this vast transition with how they responded in the end. Persons were resistant and didn't want to talk or share, and by the end of the process they were like a unit supporting each other. They were using the tool of the art therapy journal as a coping mechanism. I forgot to say that too. So there are art activities or the directives that I give that persons can take and use to support them during the times when they might feel that they have difficulty after. What tips do I have for persons wanting to do art therapy at home? As in art therapy at home with a professional, or you just mean like doing an art activity? If it is that you're just doing an art activity at home, I would say, just first off, have a space that would be your space that you would be able to create in and have access to the materials as easy as possible. And just allow yourself to explore the materials that you're using. You could even create while listening to music, just setting aside a time and a space for you to allow yourself that kind of self-care. But in terms of if it is art therapy, then you would have to schedule a specific session with me or an art therapist. Can you share more about clients' preferences to use? What do you mean, Dan Project? Can you share more about clients' preferences to use specific art supplies and the therapeutic impact? Okay. So with art therapy, you have two responses. There is the process and the product. The process of art therapy is what happens when the client is making the image. So, for example, I had a recent client who, with COVID hitting, it affected challenges with their business, and that meant how do they adjust during that time. And I gave them an art activity where they were to highlight their feelings and depict it in a certain way. And we discussed that at first, because this was our initial session, and we discussed that, and then I gave another activity in terms of processing what they this is, again, art therapy has multiple steps. So activities will, how a person is dealing with something will take time. So that's a part of the process. But within that particular activity, that's what we were focusing on, what was happening with them immediately. And when we finished, the person was like, "Oh, I am a believer in this," because they were able to put how they were feeling in an image and talk about it and have support around that. And there would be subsequent sessions to follow up on those steps. That was pretty interesting, because this was being done via the use of the phone and using an internet app, whereas there are different techniques and approaches, so it varies. And I also have to be careful in how much I can say, because you have to be trained to be able to understand that if a person doesn't understand the nature of the art materials, it can also be it can have adverse effects. A person can regress. So I would say, in terms of preferences for the art materials, in understanding the nature of the client, and their age and their gender and their level of development, then there are materials that are that can be in sync with that. So for example, when working with adults typically are not adults don't readily want to create. There's a resistance there, so I have to give them pre-done activities or pre-done tools. So for example, pre-cut magazine images that they can use because they won't readily want to draw, whereas a child may engage with crayons, markers. They may go more tactile. When I say tactile, I mean things that affect touch, your senses. I have worked with persons with disabilities, and this is even critical for them to see when you touch these materials. So if it's Play-Doh or clay, there's a sense, there's a feel that can have a physical response to a person. It might be calming, or they can get energy out, or as we say, it can be cathartic. So I hope that answers your question, Diane Project. Are there any other questions about art therapy and how it can help to cope? Thank you again for joining, guys. So as I'm waiting for more questions to pop up, just a reminder that Art Therapy Jamaica is offering sessions now online, and for persons for the month of May, I'm offering free 15-minute consultations, and then regular sessions are for an hour, and that's all online. Once you contact me, let me put the information here because I'm unable to pin it. Sessions can be scheduled via the website, or persons can email me to schedule a session. Items that would be needed are just ensuring that you have a good browser, good computer, and art materials. So I'll just go over some of the pointers too in terms of using art as a coping tool. Okay, the Ray of Light says they're told that being a hands-on person, they're a hands-on person, that's why they were recommending that art therapy would be a plus for them. So I would say yes. So when persons ask me why art therapy or who would benefit from art therapy, any age range can benefit from art therapy, just that the approach would change. Typically, if a person tends to be, I always say, if, a person might be, they're not always talkative about what happens. That doesn't mean that if somebody is always talkative, they're not necessarily a client for art therapy. But you look at those things. If you feel like something is going on and they need an outlet, art is good because the materials become the voice for the client. If a person tends to be hands-on or creative, that's kind of like a bonus. And that also makes me point out the question that I get often is, is it that an artist do you have to be artistic, to be a client? No, it varies. It really is not about a person's artistic ability, but it's about the use of the materials. So talking about art and coping again, there was a time when I did a workshop, and someone in that workshop talked about the stresses of getting married, and they created their anxiety, and they actually used different materials. They used markers, and they used Play-Doh, and they created what that anxiety looked like, and then they created a solution. And in creating the solution, they were able to talk and feel some kind of release, or, as I like to say, like reframing, a better reframing that can help them to move forward. And that goes back to what I said earlier about how the art activities can help a person reframe what's going on, and it's in the making and the product. Guys, thanks for coming. Anybody else have any more questions? I'm not sure if I fully broke down how the art materials can help or have an impact. So yes, thank you. Someone said that's great imagery to see your feelings in a tangible way. Yes, and the tangibility about it is what's the coping tool. It's something that, a person may say to me, so you're gonna keep the image, and I said, no, it's not for me, it's for you, the client, to use to cope with what's happening. There are different approaches depending on the client, and then there are also different theoretical approaches. So it would really vary depending on, in other words, how I would approach stress in someone and helping support a person in terms of what that stressor is versus anxiety is two different things. But at the end of the day, it's art therapy is the main tool, but it's just the approach will change depending on the individual. And when I say the individual, it could also be, yes, you have the stressors happening. The person may also have a psychological condition. They might be having financial threats right now, if we place it within context of what's happening now in terms of COVID. So then you have those multiple layers, and so the activities would be to frame, to focus, to have the treatment goals look at, okay, what, these are the stresses that you're dealing with, and we need to frame, we need to try and manage what you possibly can. So a person may create this, I may ask somebody to create what the stressors are. Then we look at how it's impacting them, and then ways in which to support. And in support and managing, that may take some time. Thanks, Shade. I started to talk about the materials. So when we think about like how we respond to music, how it might make us feel, there are different moods, there are different tempos, it causes us to move in different ways. It's the same thing with the art materials. So you have drawing materials, which they would say is more constructive, or could be also rigid. And then you have paint materials, and that ranges from watercolor paints, which is more fluid because you have to have water added to it. And that's where I said earlier that might evoke or help to evoke certain expressions of emotions. I definitely use it sometimes with some clients to encourage relaxation. You have different other paints. I use even finger paints. You have something legitimately called finger paint, and then there is the activity where you would use your fingers to paint. The finger paint really feels like Vaseline. That's the best texture. Texturally, that's what it feels like. And then if someone is just painting with their hands, that the act of just touching the paint can even just be calming, whereas somebody else, that might be too much for them. So that's where the training comes in terms of being able to manage and guide and support how a person responds. But generally for me, in terms of looking at coping, especially now with COVID and everything, it would really be about helping the client to highlight how they're feeling, create that, look at how there is impacting them mentally, physically, how they're how it's and this will be created, whether it's a drawing or a painting or a collage about it, and they're looking at, so I said, identifying the feelings, how those feelings are impacting their body and their responses and how they communicate. And then also identifying what the stresses are and how a person can, what they're able to control or ability to control, as well as what could help them to feel support or what support that they need. And in coping techniques would also involve ways to what we call ground a person. I know dancers who are watching may understand. Just think about how your feet ground you. You know, that's your base. And so when there's so many emotions happening, it's using the art to help persons feel grounded as another coping tool. As a coping tool, a grounding tool, which is relaxation, and then identifying if these feelings come up again, how are you able to manage that? And that can be done in when I talk about collages, that's like pre-cut images that are glued together. Well, collage, not just images, it can be any different type of material. You know, when we used to do this as well, some persons used to do this as children. You know, you used to make collages with eggshells, found objects, paper, and you glue together. Again, once an image like that is created, there's the opportunity for a person to step back and reflect. What I've also found, as I said before, there's within art therapy there's a process and there's a product. I found sometimes a person may feel, so like say in this case of COVID, a person may be struggling with how they'll be able to move forward, and I give them an activity to help them, you know, maybe ask them what areas do you need help with, and in the creation of the art and the process of the art making, they're able to, in talking with me as a therapist, you might see that their body language changes, their responses, or in the art, they're able to problem solve even maybe better than how if they're just talking to someone. So that can happen too with the art making process. And then, as I said, the product was made as well is the coping tool. But for me, I always say art therapy, the process and the product of it is really critical, because I look at what's the behavioral responses, what's the statements, what is made in the art, and how the art is used to help a person. So for those who are just joining, If you have any questions about how art could be used as a form of coping, let me know. I'm just gonna post this. I don't know yet how to pin the information. One of the things I would also look at in terms of coping and feelings that come up, like especially in anxiety. Anxiety can impact the body, and so some of the art activities we look at, maybe a body scan and where on the body that's happening. And again, same thing like I said before, looking at how these emotions or these feelings are affecting how the person responds. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that a person's situation can change. I mean, like right now, we don't know how long this is gonna last, but you just have to try and use the activities or the coping mechanisms as best as possible once learned. Thank you, Emily. So any other questions? What time is it? Sorry, I have my notes, guys. I'm making sure I've talked all the points. For those who just came in again, just reminding you all that typically sessions would occur face-to-face, but I am now having to reframe and readjust because of COVID and move online to support clients. And if they have any questions, and I'm also for the month of May offering free 15-minute consultations, and then regular sessions are for an hour. If anybody has any questions, they can contact me via the website www.arttherapyjamaica.com or info@arttherapyjamaica.com. Well, you see, the arts will always be an outlet for persons, and that's why I said at the beginning why I was drawn to studying art therapy was because, and coming back to Jamaica after studying it, is that we innately are creative beings. We cook, we sing, we dance, we do art. Am I missing anything? Sports, you name it. Play an instrument. We are really good at that, and I feel like that's our gift. But we also can be extremely violent, have issues with communication or how we manage conflict and all of those things. Or even if a person needs support, they hold that in, is very private. They don't want to share that, with anybody. And so I've always said, art, if the art is innate to who we are, why not use it as a coping tool? So, and art therapy in itself is new to Jamaica. It's a new field, even though I've been practicing for 11 years. It's a new field in Jamaica. And then you have the expressive therapies, which that's the umbrella profession. And then you have expressive therapies has dance therapy, music therapy, drama therapy, art therapy, play therapy. You have different ones. And at the end of this month, the last Tuesday in this month, we will be featuring an expressive therapist based from Canada, Georgia Fullerton. So